Well, hey there everyone. Today I have a little bit of a guitar lesson for you. I recently uploaded a video of myself playing the song, the old Christian praise song, I Worship You, Almighty God. And as I was learning to play this song, I came across several chords that were new to me, and I had to learn a handful of new chords in order to play this song. So in this video, I want to talk about how to approach some of these more complex guitar chords and kind of just walk you through my thought process of how I made the choices I did for the chords that I played in that song. Now, you'll be able to use this video to learn how to play the song the way I did, but even if you're not interested in learning to play that song, I mean, it is from 1983, so it's kind of an older song. You might not be interested in playing this song, you might not even like this song, but I think the principles and the thought process, the approach that I use to learn these chords could be helpful for any song that has more complex guitar chords. So here we go. This song has, like I said, a lot of complex chords. What I mean by that are, as guitar players, we often know these basic shapes of chords, like a G chord, a C chord, a D chord. These basic shapes, from when we start to learn to play guitar, we learn these basic chord shapes. And I think learning chord shapes is good, and that's often how we start out. In fact, when I started out playing, I had a poster on my wall with 50 or maybe 100 chord shapes on the poster. And my thinking was that if I could just memorize, that one day I'll memorize all these chord shapes, and then I'll know everything there is to know about guitar. But the thing is that there are thousands of ways to play chords. And like I said, I've been playing guitar for a lot of years, and when I went to play this song, ended up having to learn a handful of chords that I've never played before. And so the approach of memorizing thousands of chord shapes is probably not the best approach. So when I teach guitar lessons, I usually try to help students learn the language of music and what these chords mean, so that when you come across a chord you've never played before, you know what it means and you can figure out how to play it. So we're going to do that with this song. There are a few foundational things that would be helpful for you to be able to follow along in this video. First is just understanding of basic chords. So most of us that play guitar know these basic chord shapes like I talked about. The second thing would be understanding triads. Chords are just made up of 3 different notes. Those are called triads. They are C, E, G, D, F, A, E, G, B, F, A, C, G, B, D, A, C, E, B, D, F, C. That last C is not necessary. But those are our basic triads, and understanding what notes go into a chord, understanding your triads, is really helpful. It's also really important to know what the numbers inside of a chord mean. When you see a chord with a number in it, like G6 or C major 7, we know G and we know C, but what is the major 7 part and what is the 6 part? Well, those numbers just mean that they want you to add that interval to the chord. And the last thing that I think is really foundational is to understand your fretboard, to know where the notes are on the guitar, because as we start to play these more complex chords, we need to add an interval to the chord or whatever the chord name calls for, and so we'll need to know where those notes are at on the fretboard. So if those music theory terms are new to you, and if I went over them way too quickly just now, don't worry. On my website, jorgensonmusic.com, there is a booklet under the Resources tab. It's called Basics of Music Theory for Worship Teams, and you can get it for free. I just encourage you to go grab that booklet and spend some time there, and hopefully that will help kind of fill in some of the gaps of this music theory that we're talking about today. Okay, so let's dive into this song. So as I mentioned, this song has a lot of really interesting chords in it. In fact, I think it has 12, if I counted correctly, it has 12 different kinds of chords in this song. So here's what it sounds like. I'll just kind of play the chords and sing it for you so you can kind of see where we're at. So it goes, I worship you, Almighty God. There is none like you. I worship you, O Prince of Peace. That is what I want to do. I give you praise, for you are my righteousness. I worship you, Almighty Okay, so that's roughly how the song goes. If you want to hear the full version of me playing this song, click the link in the description to that video. But those are the chords, and if you know your basic chord shapes and you're following along, you're probably wondering, what are some of these chords that I'm playing? So let's talk about it. The first chord in the song is a D over G chord. D/G, but we say it as D over G. So that means that you play a D chord, but they want a G on the bottom. So we need to add a G bass note to this chord. Well, there are a few other techniques that I'm going to be using. The first one is muting strings, that we don't have to play all the strings. And when there's a string that we don't want to play, we can mute it so it doesn't ring, like this. And then you don't have to play all the notes in the chord all the time. So we can approach these songs, we can start to be thinking like music arrangers. What are the important notes that need to be played for the song to sound good? And so let's take a look at this D over G chord. What I ended up doing was just leaving out the third, so I kind of dampen the high E string with the fat of this finger, and then it doesn't ring, and so I'm just playing a D5 chord. Well, now what I can do is I can replace this A here with my first finger, and I can play a G in the bass. So now I'm playing some of the notes of a D chord here, and I'm adding a G in the bass. This chord then looks a lot like a G2 chord to me, and so when I see that D over G, I'm just kind of thinking G2, and I'm going to play my basic G2 chord. Or technically it'd be a G add 9 because I'm adding this A, which is the ninth. And notice I'm also dampening the A string with the kind of fleshy part of this finger. And the reason for that is I feel like if I add the A down low, it kind of muddies up the sound. It's just a little too muddy. And so I'm dampening that string. And so again, you don't have to play all the notes, you don't have to play all the strings, you can dampen the ones that you don't want. So that's my first chord, and it's kind of neat to play that A here because that is the melody note. So playing the chord like this really helps support my vocals and the melody, because it's I worship you, that's I worship you. So it really helps support the melody. So we go from this chord to just a regular G chord, and again I'm dampening the A string again. A regular G chord has a B here, but often I find that that B muddies up the chord a little too. Sometimes you want that sound, but often I don't, and so I often play my G chord just like this, with this finger missing from the chord and this string dampened. So I'm gonna do that here too. So I just have I worship you. And then we go to a D over E chord. Almighty God. And again, I'm leaving out the third, the F sharp from my D chord. And it's a D over E. So I'm gonna strum this in an interesting way. I'm gonna strum the E first to kind of emphasize it. I worship you, Almighty God. And then the A string is part of a D chord, so you can strum all the strings. But again, that A just feels a little muddy in the bottom, so I'm actually going to strum it like this. I'm going to pluck the lowest E string to emphasize that in the D over E, and then I'm going to skip the A and strum from the D down. And again, the high E is being dampened. I'm not playing the F sharp, and I'm dampening it with the fat of this finger. So we have, I worship you, Almighty, and then to just a regular E chord, God. And I think I'm making it an E minor 7, just keeping that ring finger there. Basic chord. And then we're going to B minor 7 to A minor 7. And here's where things started to get a little bit interesting for me. I started playing it like this with this B minor 7 chord, and then to this A minor 7 chord. And that was nice, you know, I worship you, Almighty God, there is none. And that works really well, that's nice, but I wanted those two chords to sound a little bit more rich and chimey, and these open chords just sounded a little bit bright to me. So I started looking for a way to play these chords differently. And I thought, well, if I play them as bar chords, they'll be a little bit chimier. So I played B minor like this. And then I left the A minor 7 open. And that was better. It kind of had this little jazzy vibe to it, and I liked the sound of that. But I still wanted it. It still wasn't quite what I was looking for. I wanted this richer, chimier sound. So I thought, man, if I play the bar chord instead of with the root note on the A string, if I move the root note down to the E string, it'll be on these fatter strings. It'll sound a lot richer. So I decided to play the minor chords here, and that was a little more what I was looking for. But then I also realized that it would sound a little bit more jazzy if I finger pick them. So instead of strumming them, I decided to pick them like this. And that was the sound I was looking for. Vibey, rich sound. And then things got even a little bit more interesting. As I was playing the song, I started to realize that the strings I was finger picking are the low E, the D string, and the G string. And so that meant that this finger holding the note on the A string wasn't necessary. I'm not playing that note. So it's just made it a lot simpler if I just bar the whole thing, and I don't even have to worry about this finger. So as guitar players, we can always look for ways to make things simpler and easier to play. So that's what I started doing, just playing it like this, just a bar. But you do have to be really choosy and picky about what strings you're playing. But because I'm going to finger picking right there, it became very easy to do. So that's the B minor 7 to the A minor 7, and then we get to the next chord that was a new chord for me, and that is a C over D. You know, to be honest, I don't think I've ever played a C over D chord. And I wasn't sure how to do that. And so I started thinking about it. You have a C, and it means you need a D on the bottom. Well, I could play it like that, but that's not very practical. So I started looking for a way to add a D to the bottom. And I started to think about this bar chord. This is a C chord. And I thought, well, there's the D right there. All I have to do is move this finger there. So what if I just barred those three? That would work. So then I could also put my ring finger down here. That would add another G. It's a little out of tune there. And then I guess if I wanted a C, I could add my pinky here. So that would be a C over D chord. And I've started playing it that way. There's a part of the song that goes C over D to D, back to C over D to D. And it's kind of fast. It's like... And that was working okay, but I felt like I was moving up and down the neck so far. I thought, man, is there an easier way? So I started looking for another way to play a C over D. And so then I started playing it this way. I found this open D string, and I thought, well, if I put these two fingers here, then I have a C and an E. So I have a D in the bass, a C, and an E. And again, I have to be careful what strings I pick, because I don't want this A to ring out. I don't want the low E to ring. I don't want the high E. So I dampen those two strings with my fingers, and then I just don't strum the A string. So I started my strum at the D string down. And that became my C over D. Well, again, it got a little bit more interesting as I started to realize, well, hey, why don't I play the D here instead of open? And then if I play the string, the 5th fret on the D string, I have a G. And then if I play the 5th fret here, I have that same C and then an E. And so I have D, G, C, E. And actually I could just bar that again. Again, I don't want this string to ring, so I dampen it. And I don't want this string to ring. And that could be my C over D. And that sounds really kind of jazzy, chimey, has a vibe to it. So that's how I settled on playing the C over D. But you can see I went several places, you know, starting up here, and then landing here, and then finally deciding to play it this way. So that was a C over D. And then it goes to G major 7, which is a pretty basic chord. I play it this way because, again, I don't usually add this note in the G string. I mean, you could play it like this. But again, don't have to play all the strings. That sounds just a little too much, too muddy to me, so I just play like that. And those are the chords in the verse of this song. It kind of repeats after that, so it sounds like this. On the second section of it, it goes, I worship you, O Prince of Peace. That is what I want. But on this word want, they add the major 7, a C major 7 over D. Instead of just the regular C over D, which I decided to play that way, they want the major 7. So you could just skip the major 7, just play C over D again. Want to do, and that works okay. But I really like the 7, so I opted to go back to playing it this way. And since this is a C, that would be the 8 or the 1. If I lower it a fret, it becomes this major 7. So there it is. Want to do, and it's kind of nice because I can play the C major 7 over D this way, and then just slide it down for the D chord. I want to do. So it goes, I worship you, O Prince of Peace. That is what I want to do. And then we go into this chorus. And the chord chart calls for a C over G. But I actually am taking a little bit of a liberty here. I was playing it as a G over C. I don't know if that was a bit of a dyslexic moment, but it turns out I kind of like the G over C. And so I'm going to keep playing it as a G over C. And what I did here was, again, you have your G chord, but we have to add a C in the bass. And so I thought, well, why don't I just slide, most of this G chord is open. Why don't I just slide the chord up here so we have a C in the bass? So that's what I did. And it goes, I give you praise, I give you praise, to G major 7. And then to the basic E minor 7 chord. For you are my, and then it goes to a G over A. So same trick as the G over C, I just slide it up to an A. And there's my G over A. I don't want to play this E string because that would be an A here. And A is on the bottom, I don't really need to add another one on the top. So I will dampen that string or not strum it so that it doesn't ring, and then you just have a G over A. So we have, I give you praise, for you are my righteousness. And that's just an A minor chord, I make it an A minor 7. And then it goes C over D to D, back to C over D. So I go, and then to D, I, G, and then it repeats, worship you, like in the verses. D over G to G, Almighty God, there is none like you. So there you have it. Those are some of the complex chords that I found in this song, and I had to kind of learn how to play. And that's sort of how you can approach any of these complex chords that have numbers, chords that are inversions with the slash in them. You can use your music theory to think through different ways to play these chords. And it's often kind of fun to add all of the intricacies in because it sounds so rich and interesting. I mean, you could play this song with just basic chords. We could go, I worship you, Almighty God, there is none like you, I worship you. And that does sound nice, but adding in all of the things that the song actually calls for, I just think makes the song a lot more fun to play and gives it a lot of flavor to the sound. So I hope this video is helpful to you. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, click the like button down below. Don't forget to subscribe for more music and adventure videos. And if you're interested in that music theory booklet, head over to my website, jorgensonmusic.com, and pick that up. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.